They told us Kobe Bryant was a black Mamba, the unstoppable legend, the flawless competitor, the man who could outwork God himself. But what if the men who played beside him, coached him, and feared him were hiding something darker? What if behind every highlight reel and victory speech was a man consumed by obsession, betrayal, and psychological warfare? Tonight, the whispers get loud. NBA legends are finally speaking, and their words are cutting deeper than any defense Kobe ever faced. From Phil Jackson calling him uncoachable, to Charles Barkley revealing midnight threats, to Jeremy Lin's story of humiliation that left teammates broken. The truth isn't the Mamba mentality you think it is. It's control. It's manipulation. It's pain disguised as greatness. And when Shaq, Gilbert Arenas, and even Tracy McGrady joined the list of voices turning against him, the story stops being about basketball. It becomes about power, ego, and the terrifying price of becoming a myth. This isn't the Kobe you grew up admiring. This is the one they never wanted you to see. They say greatness demands sacrifice, but nobody ever said what or who had to be sacrificed. For Kobe Bryant, the cost wasn't just sweat and trophies. It was trust, loyalty, and sometimes his own humanity. What began as a rise of a prodigy soon turned into the making of a myth. And like all myths, the truth got buried under banners and applause. But not everyone was clapping. Behind the gold jerseys and highlight reels, the people who actually knew him were whispering the kind of stories that don't make it to ESPN. Stories about a man too smart, too driven, and too cold to coexist with anyone who dared to question him. And the first person to draw blood was his own coach, Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson didn't just call Kobe uncoachable. He immortalized it. He wrote it down like a confession the last season, a book that didn't read like a memoir. It read like a crime report. Jackson, the Zen master, the man who turned Michael Jordan into a god, couldn't handle Kobe Bryant. The same coach who could break down Dennis Rodman's chaos couldn't decode Kobe's ego. In the book, Jackson described a player so resistant to authority that it felt like dealing with a ticking bomb. His exact words? Kobe was uncoachable. No spin, no filters, just professional execution. Coming from a man who coached Jordan, that line hit harder than any dunk. But what Jackson didn't say out loud was even louder. He told Jerry Buss, the Lakers owner, that he wouldn't come back if Kobe stayed. Imagine that. One of the most respected coaches in basketball history refusing to work with a player who was supposed to be his masterpiece. It wasn't about skill. It was about psychology. Phil wasn't describing an athlete. He was describing a case study. The more he tried to teach Kobe, the more Kobe pushed back. The moment you told him what to do, he'd do the opposite just to prove he could. And when Jackson compared him to Jordan years later, the verdict was brutal. MJ was better. Coming from a man who trained them both, that wasn't opinion. That was a scar. Even after reuniting and winning 2 more rings, the ghost of that book followed them. The word uncoachable stuck like a curse. Then came Paul Shirley, a player nobody even remembers until he said something the world couldn't ignore. Shirley wasn't a star, not even close. He was a 12th man, a ghost in the locker room, the kind of guy who sees everything because nobody pays attention to him. And what he saw in Kobe was enough to make him call him a true sociopath. Not a jerk, not a diva, a sociopath. That word doesn't just sting, it diagnoses. Shirley described Kobe as terrifyingly detached, cold to his teammates, and obsessed with copying Michael Jordan down to his walk, his voice, even his mannerisms. Teammates used to call him Baby Mike as a joke, but Shirley said it wasn't funny. It was disturbing. It was like watching someone erase their own identity and replace it with someone else's. He talked about how Kobe treated teammates like props, background actors in the movie of his life. There was no small talk, no warmth, no connection. If you weren't helping him win, you didn't exist. Shirley wrote that Kobe's arrogance wasn't just ego, it was emptiness. He said, "He scared me." That's not a sentence you hear from one professional athlete about another. He described Bryant yelling at bench players in practice, spewing profanity with surgical precision, like he wanted to humiliate them on a molecular level. And the most chilling part? He didn't even raise his voice. It wasn't anger, it was control. Cold, calculated control. Shirley compared him to a machine that learned emotions by watching others pretend to have them. For Shirley, Kobe wasn't competing against opponents. He was trying to conquer the concept of empathy itself. Then came Charles Barkley, the one man who's never held his tongue. But even Barkley sounded shaken when he told his story. It started with a simple critique. Barkley said Kobe was selfish during a playoff game. The Lakers lost, and Chuck called him out on TV, saying he shot once in the second half to prove he didn't have help. That's standard commentary. But what followed wasn't standard at all. Barkley said his phone started lighting up in the middle of the night. It was Kobe, text after text, profanity, threats. For hours of messages from midnight to 4 a.m., Barkley tried to laugh it off years later, but his voice betrayed him. He was mad, he said, like really mad. Strip away the jokes, and you got a superstar sending what amounts to verbal attacks over criticism. That's not confidence. That's paranoia. Barkley even said the text sounded like someone trying to prove power, not innocence. And that wasn't the only time Kobe lost control when challenged. Inside the Lakers' locker room, those outbursts were legendary. It wasn't passion. It was punishment. If you didn't meet his impossible standards, he'd make you feel like you didn't belong in the same sport. Players describe him as relentless, but behind that word hides a darker one, merciless. There's a fine line between leadership and domination, and Kobe crossed it more than once. He'd scream during film sessions, insult teammates in front of staff, and ice people out for weeks. One player later admitted that half the team feared practice more than actual games. Because Kobe didn't play basketball in practice, he declared war. When Jeremy Lin joined the Lakers, he thought he was going to learn from a legend. Instead, he got schooled in humiliation. In 2014, Lin said he told Kobe, "Talk to me like a man. Don't talk down to me like I'm a boy." That's when the silence started. For months, no words, no eye contact, just a wall of coldness. Lin said he could handle the yelling. What broke him was the silence. Kobe had a way of punishing people without ever raising his voice. He didn't need to. He just erased you. Add in the racial undertone, an Asian American player being mocked during the Linsanity era, and it paints an even colder picture. Bryant once told reporters, "I don't even know who that guy is," right after Lin dropped 38 points on his Lakers. That wasn't ignorance. That was calculated disrespect. Kobe called his team soft like Charmin, and it wasn't funny to anyone but him. Lin said the rant left players shaken, some literally crying in the locker room. When the leader of your team treats his own players like disposable parts, that's not motivation, that's emotional warfare. And when Kobe told his teammates, "I just came by to say bye to some of you bums who are getting traded," it wasn't bravado, it was cruelty. To him, everything was transactional. You were either useful or worthless. And yet somehow, fans called it Mamba mentality. But behind the motivational posters and Nike ads, there was a man who couldn't turn it off. The same cold intensity that made him great also made him impossible to be around. Teammates respected him, but few liked him. Coaches admired him, but many avoided him. The truth that's starting to surface isn't about his jump shot or footwork. It's about the cost of genius. How a man could build a global empire of admiration while leaving a trail of broken relationships in his wake. Because when you look past the jerseys, the trophies, and the speeches, what you start to see is a pattern. Mentors betrayed, teammates alienated, rivals humiliated, and friends silenced. And maybe that's the real reason so many NBA legends are speaking now. Not out of jealousy, not out of spite, but out of guilt. Guilt that they watched it happen and said nothing. Guilt that they helped build a myth that swallowed a man. And as the testimonies keep surfacing, from Barkley's late-night text to Lin's humiliation, from Phil's betrayal to Shirley's diagnosis, a disturbing picture starts to form. The Black Mamba wasn't just a mindset. It was a mask that hid something far more fragile underneath. And the ones who knew him best are finally peeling it off. If the first half of Kobe Bryant's story was built on fear and dominance, the second half was held together by illusion, a carefully constructed myth that even the legends who once praised him now seem desperate to dismantle. The deeper you go, the more it starts to feel like everyone was in on the act, the coaches, the media, even the players who called him brother. But not everyone stayed silent. And the next wave of voices didn't just question Kobe's attitude. They went for his legacy. When Gilbert Arenas spoke, it wasn't a casual podcast jab. It was a calculated hit. He didn't just question Kobe's greatness. He tore it apart, brick by brick. He was a sidekick. Arenas said he was the next Pippen. In one sentence, he reduced one of basketball's greatest icons to someone else's supporting character. The internet exploded, but Arenas wasn't done. You only respect the driver, he said. Nobody respect the passenger. The implication was poisonous, that Kobe's first 3 championships didn't belong to him, that he was just a passenger in Shaquille O'Neal's car. For Kobe's fans, that was blasphemy. For his peers, it was confirmation. Arenas said what many thought but never dared to voice, that the media built Kobe's myth because the NBA needed a new Jordan, not because he earned it. He even went as far as to call the Mamba mentality a lie, a PR product that fans worshiped but teammates despised. During Kobe's prime, everybody loathed it, Arenas said, especially his teammates. Those words hit like shrapnel. They didn't just wound Kobe's reputation. They challenged the very foundation of his legacy, the idea that obsession equals greatness. Arenas' tone wasn't envy. It was accusation, like he was unmasking a cult leader who had convinced the world his cruelty was discipline. But if Arenas' attack was a scalpel, Jeff Teague's was a sledgehammer. He didn't just talk about Kobe's ego. He went after the NBA system that protected it. On his Club 520 podcast, Teague laughed when the topic of all defensive team selections came up. They just put anybody on there after a while. He said, "I played Kobe, bro. He wasn't guarding like that." The studio fell silent. Teague wasn't just criticizing a player. He was accusing the league of fabricating a legend. Maybe the first 5 years he admitted. But after that, nah, they just kept putting him on there. That wasn't basketball analysis. That was an expose, a confession that the NBA machine itself was complicit in inflating Kobe's myth. Teague went further, calling his style forced, saying he looked like he was trying too hard. For younger fans, that sounded disrespectful. For players, it sounded like relief. Someone had finally said it. And when Teague called the 2009 and 2010 championship rosters not deep enough to be memorable, he wasn't just attacking the teams. He was questioning the man who led them. He implied those rings were built on narrative, not substance. And the narrative, he said, was maintained because the league needed Kobe to be the face of its empire. But Teague's confession wasn't born in a vacuum. There was a story behind the bitterness. In 2014, the Lakers tried to sign Teague to help the aging Bryant. Teague refused. Too many taxes, too much drama. Later, when they faced each other, Kobe looked him dead in the eyes and said, "You left me out here with this underscore." That moment became the seed of a grudge. Teague never forgot it. Years later, when he dismantled Kobe's defensive legacy, it wasn't analysis. It was revenge. Revenge disguised as truth. And then came Tracy McGrady, the brother turned betrayer. T-Mac and Kobe were supposed to be two halves of the same story. Raw talent, impossible drive, mutual respect. They watched film together as teenagers. They called each other family. So when McGrady said in 2025, "If I was in Kobe's shoes, I'd win those championships too," it didn't sound like confidence. It sounded like betrayal. He wasn't just questioning Kobe's greatness. He was saying it could have been anyone's. "I never had the opportunity," he told First Take. "But if I did, I damn sure would have done the same." The internet froze. The brotherhood shattered. The reaction was so violent that McGrady had to apologize within days. He tried to walk it back. "I never said I was better than Kobe." But the damage was done. The fact that he said it after Kobe's death made it worse. Fans called it clout chasing. Players called it disrespect. But underneath the outrage was something real. Envy. McGrady's career was haunted by what-ifs, and Kobe's success was a living reminder of what he never achieved. Their friendship had been real. But legacy has no friends. In the world of basketball gods, there's only room for one immortal. The pattern was forming. Everyone who once stood beside Kobe, as coach, teammate, rival, or friend, had eventually turned their testimony into ammunition. Each quote, each clip, each podcast moment became another piece of evidence in a growing public trial against a man who couldn't defend himself. And then out of nowhere, Stephen A. Smith threw gasoline on the fire. When Stephen A. went on air in March 2025 and claimed LeBron James never attended Kobe Bryant's memorial, the entire sports world stopped. It was a lie, and not a small one. LeBron had been there, privately, quietly, choosing not to be filmed. But the damage was done. Smith's rant, broadcast live on First Take, had done something no journalist should ever do: weaponize a dead man's memory. It was a move so reckless that fans immediately called it televised defamation. And when Smith finally apologized, it didn't sound like regret. It sounded like a lawyer's statement. Sterile, rehearsed, corporate. But what made that lie even darker was Smith's history with Kobe himself. In 2006, he called Bryant volatile and admitted he feared him during interviews. So why bring him up again nearly 2 decades later? Some fans think it wasn't about Kobe at all. It was about control. Smith's feud with LeBron had reached new heights, and invoking Kobe's name was his nuclear option. It was never about truth. It was about ratings. The manipulation was surgical. He knew invoking Kobe's memory would create division, and division drives views. Even in death, Kobe's shadow was currency. He had become the NBA's most profitable ghost. Every headline, every clip, every documentary was another transaction in the economy of his legend. The same media that built him was now feeding on him. The people who once called him a hero were dissecting him like a specimen. It was no longer about who Kobe was. It was about what he meant to everyone else. But the darkest blow came from someone who once called him family. Shaquille O'Neal's freestyle in that New York nightclub wasn't a song. It was a confession. "Tell me how my taste," he rapped, mocking Kobe's 2008 finals loss like a funeral chant. The crowd laughed, but the story behind it wasn't funny. Years earlier, when Kobe faced questioning over the Colorado assault case, he had allegedly told investigators, "I should have done what Shaq does, paid him off." That single line became the death of their friendship. Shaq felt betrayed, publicly, personally, eternally. His rap wasn't random. It was revenge dressed as rhythm. And when Shaq said, "He couldn't do it without me," the crowd roared because deep down they believed it. That night wasn't about bars. It was about balance. For years, the world had worshipped Kobe as a lone warrior. Shaq's rap reminded them that he wasn't alone, and that maybe, just maybe, he had never been the real leader at all. The legends had spoken. Coaches had written books. Rivals had testified. Friends had confessed. Every story different, yet eerily aligned, describing a man so obsessed with control that he couldn't see how many people he'd broken along the way. The Black Mamba wasn't a nickname anymore. It was a diagnosis. But just when the storm seemed to fade, a new voice rose from the chaos. One that didn't belong to the NBA, the media, or even basketball. A man who built his entire persona on controversy decided to rewrite the tragedy itself. Charleston White, internet provocateur, professional antagonist, entered the conversation with something far more poisonous than criticism. He called it revelation. The world called it blasphemy. And what he said next would make everything before it looked tame. When Charleston White opened his mouth, the internet froze. The man known for turning shock into a career had just crossed a line nobody imagined anyone would ever cross. He didn't just insult Kobe Bryant. He rewrote his death into a sermon of punishment. Man, Kobe Bryant mistreated his mama and daddy. He spat into the camera. God don't like that. He let the boy crash that helicopter. It wasn't commentary. It was cruelty turned into content. The clip spread like wildfire, shared across TikTok, X, YouTube, and every gossip forum that thrives on outrage. Some called him brave. Most called him evil. But everyone watched. And that was the point. White had weaponized grief, using tragedy as a megaphone for attention. He built a conspiracy from dust, stitching together old family disputes and turning them into divine vengeance. The claim? That Kobe's fatal crash was an accident, but a message from God, punishment for cutting off his parents and letting his wife get all the money. It was grotesque but disturbingly effective. He quoted fragments of real headlines, the 2013 memorabilia lawsuit, the public family fallout, and twisted them into a moral script that sounded almost biblical. He turned internet rumor into prophecy. In the video, he even mocked Gianna Bryant's death, calling her collateral damage. It was beyond disrespect. It was desecration. Yet millions watched, commented, and argued. Some defended free speech. Others demanded arrest. The result was exactly what White wanted: chaos, clicks, and controversy. But behind that chaos was something deeper, proof of how public memory had shifted. Kobe Bryant, once the untouchable symbol of perseverance, had become an open-source narrative that anyone could edit. The media had softened him into a saint. The haters had sharpened him into a villain. What Charleston White proved was that in death, even the greatest icons belonged to the loudest storyteller. The Bryant family stayed silent, but silence on the internet is never protection. It's fuel. Every refusal to respond was taken as confirmation. Comment sections filled with amateur detectives and moral judges. He did treat his parents bad. That's why it happened. Karma, don't miss. The same audience that once chanted Mamba forever was now dissecting his soul like it was trending evidence. What made it worse was how quickly the NBA ecosystem turned that noise into programming. Sports networks recycled the clip under the banner of debate. Analysts dissected whether Kobe's upbringing had shaped his flaws. Podcasts framed his death as a cautionary tale about pride. Nobody noticed that they were all just echoing a man whose only credential was controversy. Charleston White had infected the discourse like a virus, and everyone was now quoting him without realizing it. In the months that followed, something eerie happened. Former players started editing their own stories too. One after another, they appeared on podcasts with titles like The Real Kobe Bryant, What He Was Really Like, and Why I Couldn't Play With Him. Some were genuine, others were opportunistic, but all of them had one thing in common. They knew that saying his name still printed digital money. Even Phil Jackson couldn't escape the echo. An unearthed clip of his old interview resurfaced, where he admitted Kobe never forgave something I said. Fans began asking, what did he say? Conspiracy accounts filled in the blanks with pure invention. Some claimed it was about Jordan, others about Colorado, others about family. The truth didn't matter anymore. Only the suspicion did. By 2026, YouTube's algorithm had quietly built an entire subgenre, the Kobe Files. Thumbnails of crying teammates, dim-lit locker rooms, and smoky overlays reading exposed dominated basketball recommendations. Each video claimed to reveal the real story. Each borrowed clips, rumors, or quotes, from Phil, from Barkley, from Lynn, from arenas, looping them into endless speculation. The irony was haunting. The same man who demanded absolute control over his image had become the one thing he couldn't control: content. And maybe that's the real tragedy. Kobe Bryant spent 2 decades proving he didn't need anyone. He fought with coaches, ignored teammates, and built mythology on the idea of total self-reliance. But in the end, he became completely dependent on the media he once manipulated, on the fans who once worshipped him, on the storytellers who now profit from his name. He became what he feared most, a narrative owned by others. Listen long enough to people who knew him, and you start to hear a pattern in the noise. Phil Jackson saw rebellion. Paul Shirley saw pathology. Barkley saw arrogance. Jeremy Lin saw cruelty. Arenas saw fraud. Teague saw fabrication. McGrady saw jealousy. Stephen A. Smith saw opportunity. Shaq saw betrayal. Charleston White saw a headline. Each one saw something different, but none of them saw peace. Maybe that's the dark truth the legends were exposing all along. Not that Kobe Bryant was evil, but that he was human. Painfully, tragically human, in a world that demands gods. The NBA didn't want a man with flaws. It wanted a symbol of obsession, a brand it could sell. And once that brand was built, it became too valuable to admit it was ever broken. Every denial, every highlight reel, every documentary since his death has been another coat of paint on a cracked statue. But no amount of tribute can silence the witnesses. The stories are out there now, unfiltered, unretractable. The old teammates who saw the rage, the coaches who saw the walls, the rivals who saw the loneliness. Together they built a mosaic of a man who lived in permanent competition. Not with others, but with a version of himself he could never satisfy. In the final analysis, maybe that's what destroyed him. Not the crash, not the criticism, not even the legends exposing him. It was the curse of perfection, the need to dominate every moment until there were none left to dominate. The Black Mamba wasn't just a nickname, it was armor, and armor always cracks from the inside. Years after his death, the echoes remain. Every time a young player says Mamba mentality, they're repeating a mantra they don't fully understand, a phrase born from brilliance and built on pain. And maybe that's why these revelations hit so hard. Because when legends speak about Kobe now, they're not just talking about him. They're confessing something about themselves, about what the pursuit of greatness does to a person's soul. The truth doesn't make Kobe less of a legend. It just makes the legend harder to worship. And in the end, that might be the most honest tribute of all. Not blind praise, not sanitized documentaries, but the uncomfortable realization that even the brightest stars burn out ugly. Because for every championship ring, there's a sleepless night. For every highlight reel, there's a voicemail nobody returns. For every statue, there's a story someone's afraid to tell. And now, after years of silence, those stories are finally out. Unfiltered, unedited, undeniable. The world wanted a hero. The game created a myth. The legends are exposing the man. And what's left after all the noise, all the betrayal, and all the truth is a question that still haunts every player who ever tried to live up to him. If being great means becoming this, was it ever worth it? So now you've heard it. The voices that were never supposed to be recorded, the confessions whispered behind championship banners, the truth that outlived the man himself. Every legend who spoke carried a piece of guilt in their voice, because deep down, they all helped build a myth they're now tearing down. Maybe they were protecting him. Maybe they were protecting themselves. But either way, their silence shaped a god, and their honesty is now unmaking him in front of millions. Kobe Bryant's story isn't just about basketball anymore. It's about the cost of being worshipped. It's about the weight of legacy, so heavy it crushes the human underneath. The legends aren't exposing him out of hate. They're warning us. Because every player chasing Mamba mentality is walking the same razor's edge between genius and destruction, discipline and obsession, admiration and isolation. The truth is, no one survives being perfect. The game doesn't love you back, and the applause fades faster than you can hear it. What remains are the stories, the leaked ones, the whispered ones, the ones that make fans uncomfortable. And when the cameras fade, the truth is all that's left echoing in the dark arenas they used to own. This isn't about canceling a legend. It's about confronting what we made him into. Because sometimes, the scariest thing isn't who Kobe Bryant was. It's how much of him lives in everyone who worshipped him. This story isn't ending. It's just beginning.